What's up, football fans? Thanks for tuning in to the penultimate episode of my summer video series. Boy oh boy do I have a treat for the diehard football junkies this week. In case you missed me last Monday, my apologies, but I finally made my way to San Diego and enjoyed a few days of the California breeze, which is a must at this time of year given my city's unbearable triple-digit heat. I have no doubt in my mind though that this week's special guest will get the ball rolling again by sharing some insightful stories, offering a glimpse into his role, one that rarely attracts the spotlight, yet may be more paramount to the evolution and sustained success of an NFL franchise than any other title. Why? Because his duties are an integral piece of the puzzle. He's a former high school football coach of mine with an awfully impressive resume, highlighted by national award-winning video production, 4 state championships, a stint with NFL Films, and most notably, a Super Bowl ring decorated with more than 200 diamonds. Ladies and gents, please welcome Denver Broncos Midwest area scout and fellow Wildcat alum, Bryan Chesin, to my corner of the end zone. Chesin has spent the better half of the last 3 years on the road, traveling from one destination to another, taking names, breaking down film, and filing reports. He watches ball for a living. More specifically, he's responsible for studying all draft-eligible college football players that perform in his scouting region.
A big part of my job is being on the front lines, in terms of, boots on the ground at a school, using my sources to kind of really get a good feel for, like the guy's background. Like, how does this kid compete in the weight room? Does he love ball? Does he get there early? Does he do extra stuff? Is he watching a lot of film outside the facility? So I think a lot of that stuff has been a big kind of key in our wheel the last couple of years. And I think we've been extremely successful. And like I said, that's all credit to Matt Russell and John Elway and Brian Stark really instilling that in us to really dig that stuff out. And it's helped us. I mean, our drafts the last 3-4 years have been very, very good.
Any other year, Chesin would already have left his home in Chicago and traveled east to begin making his first round of stops at programs scattered across Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky. August training camps, delayed this season because of the COVID-19 pandemic, are generally the best chance for Chesin to get his boots on the ground and document key information.
Typically, those practices are more open, more accessible. Everybody's in a good mood because, everybody's 0-0. There's no losing streaks. Everyone's optimistic about the season.
It's usually also Chesin's first opportunity to see strides that returning players have made since the end of last season. To a certain degree, college training camps are as valuable to a pro team's evaluation as they are for a school's preparation.
During that time, it's a really critical aspect for me is seeing the player live, seeing how they compete, seeing how they carry themselves, getting the body type, and then talking to the sources that in the building in terms of like whether it's the strength coach, a pro liaison, an academic advisor, a coach that someone in the building that had access to that kid or that player for a long period of time. That's going to give you kind of an unbiased, opinion.
Under normal circumstances, Chesin would be hopping on a plane near the end of the month to regroup with the rest of Denver's scouting department at the team's headquarters, where originally they were scheduled to hold joint practices ahead of a preseason matchup with the Chicago Bears. Again, this period is critical to the scouting process.
You've just seen, you would say, the top college players in your area, right? And you're seeing, their body types and, their athletic skill sets. And then you get to really see your team. So it's a good way of, comparing and contrasting like this, player A is as good as player B on our roster, or player B on our roster is much better than the kid that I saw at Notre Dame or Kentucky or Michigan or Ohio State. It's a really good barometer kind of setting yourself up for the season.
But this year, Chesin and the rest of the Broncos must do without. Details about the 2020 NFL regular season remain in flux, which means Chesin is waiting, like most of us, to receive his protocol and continue trekking. To pass time, he returned to his roots in Arizona, where he's been staying with family, reminiscing on his fortuitous journey.
I was never the most talented athlete. I think anybody that's, known me for a long time knows that, but I was lucky. I understood just when stuff was put on the board, it fit, I couldn't do well in school, math, science, whatever.
But that's okay, because he discovered his true calling.
Put X's and O's up on the board and you put 11 on 11 and it just clicked and I knew it and I loved it.
Chesin's high school coaches at Chaparral in the early 2000s used to joke, in a pretty serious sense, that one day he'd be their eye in the sky. Their comments planted a seed in young Chesin's mind that eventually blossomed into a burning desire to become a football coach. So when presented the opportunity to return to his old stomping grounds and join Charlie Rago's dynamic staff in the spring of 2009 as a video coordinator and assistant defensive backs coach, Chesin worked his tail off, ultimately relishing the opportunity to develop young players.
Really see them grow from, when you're freshmen, you got baby faces that turn into, kids that were much bigger, stronger, and probably tougher than me. So, developing that relationship and keeping lifelong bonds was my favorite part of coaching.
In 2013, Chesin's commitment to his craft, which included producing weekly in-season highlights and individual recruiting reels, finally paid off. After being urged by a player's mother to enter Football Scoop's 2013 Video of the Year contest, to his own amazement, Chesin won. And 2 weeks later, he interviewed with NFL Films for an apprenticeship program that he'd applied to nearly 6 months earlier and had almost totally forgotten. When August rolled around, Chesin was transitioning into a brand new role, thousands of miles away, working in the mecca of television production on a show called NFL Playbook.
Biggest challenge was just leaving home. I moved across the country and lived in South New Jersey, a place I had no friends, I didn't know anybody, and I was making about $7. I was making minimum wage, like $7.25 an hour. So it really, made you answer the question, do you really want to do this and do you like it?
Chesin loved it. He loved interacting with the show's personalities, NFL legends Brian Baldinger, Sterling Sharp, and Sean O'Hara. He loved analyzing schemes and coverages and constantly conducting research that would later make its way on air. He loved the grind, but deep down he also knew he loved to physically be around the game. It's why Chesin turned down a seasonal production role with NFL Network upon the completion of his internship with NFL Films. He was chasing a role better suited to his entire skill set. It just so happened to land in his lap when a former teammate, one of his best friends, Darren Muji, fresh into the start of his own scouting stint with the Broncos, relayed that there was an opening in Denver's video department and told Chesin he ought to apply. More than half a decade later, Chesin feels even more fortunate than he did when he first got his foot in the door at Mile High.
You get thrown into the fire and you don't realize how lucky, the first professional quarterback I ever got to work with was Peyton Manning. And then, my second year in the NFL, I get to win a Super Bowl. There's guys that I know on the road that haven't been to the playoffs in 15 years or haven't been to a Super Bowl or had a chance. So, looking back, I have much more fond memories than I did in the moment.
Of course, there are some that he's not so fond of as well. Early on, Chesin was forced to face the realities of professional football. It's a business, no matter your status, at the end of the day. One of the many roles he wound up playing is infamously documented on each season of HBO's Hard Knocks, a deep dive television series into NFL training camps.
I was the Grim Reaper. So when we had to make the cuts, I was the guy that would walk down to the training room and get those guys. And so they would always know, they figured that out about 3 days after. So I had a couple, the rookies at the time, or even the vets be like, they'd be like, oh, the Grim Reaper's coming, the Turk. So yeah, that was a little humbling experience, knowing that, you're taking away a lot of guys' dreams, and you just don't know how to handle that. So that was fun, in the most sarcastic way possible.
Chesin's extensive football background was further put to test in year 2, when he moved out of the video room and into an assistant player personnel role. Essentially, he was a scouting intern, trying to soak up as much knowledge as possible, while also making himself available for minute tasks, like picking free agents up at the airport for workouts, or assisting the equipment staff with an extra load of laundry. He had wedged his foot in the door and was willing to do whatever was needed to ensure he never left.
You're just trying to learn as much as you can, the report structure, how we operate, what are the fundamental kind of things that, we look for as Denver Broncos, that stuff. And it was really just a crash course in scouting and evaluation and really just managing your time. There's a lot of stuff gets thrown on your plate on a daily basis.
Some tasks proved to be more memorable than others, like the time Chesin was filming practice and lending a hand to some of the special teams units. Suddenly, Denver's then quarterbacks coach Greg Knapp requested an extra set of hands to catch passes in the flats.
Just stood there and I caught a pass. I remember I caught a pass from Peyton Manning and I was like, wow, that's something I never thought I would do. And then after practice, he told me, he's like, oh yeah, good hands. I was like, wow. I didn't even know what to say. I was like, yeah, it's lost in the stars.
Understandably, my guy. That's one hell of a compliment, especially considering Manning is the only starting quarterback in NFL history to win a Super Bowl with 2 different franchises.
That was probably the most surreal, kind of face slap to holy crap, I work in the NFL right now. This is happening.
By the start of year 4, he caught his biggest break yet. Denver did some shuffling to its scouting department, and Chesin scored a promotion, earning the title of Midwest Area Scout.
That was a huge positive for me because you kind of get to step out of your comfort zone and you kind of get to learn a different side of the building. You know, when I was inside the building, I was really focused on the pro side because that's what we were in every day. And then working on the college side too gives you just a really good scope of just how the whole scouting process worked.
I asked Chesin what he thinks the secret is behind the success of such a storied franchise like the Denver Broncos. His answer was surprisingly simple. It all starts with the people in the building and the culture that late owner Pat Bowlen implemented at each level of the organization.
PR to scouting to coaching to guys that work in the video room when I was down there to equipment to operations. I mean, the training staff, the strength staff. I mean, everybody to a fold, like I'm not even BSing, is just a really good person. I mean, and it's easy to go to work with a bunch of like-minded, self-starting people that love their job and want to be there every day.
As much as Chesin loves traveling from August through November, visiting schools, nitpicking tape, and evaluating kids' personal and athletic backgrounds, an event that occurs during what's deemed by most as the off-season often carries the most weight.
Combine's obviously a huge portion for us because not only do you get to see the testing numbers and that stuff, but you get really good face-to-face interaction with the players, which is something you don't get during the season.
This year, because of COVID-19 concerns, the Broncos opted to not send assistant coaches to Indianapolis for the week's worth of activities. In their absence, Denver's area scouts were assigned position groups to conduct informal interviews. Chesin was responsible for chopping it up with as many running backs and receivers he could speak to during the 6-hour interview window each day.
I try to keep it light. You know, some guys, grind these kids. I just try to create a relationship.
Most importantly, Chesin's goal was to determine whether or not they were what he calls receptive.
I try to keep them off balance where I try to be cool and be like, oh yeah, so like what video games are you into? And then I put them on the board really quick with scheme and it kind of catches them off guard.
Once the NFL scouting combine ends, scouts turn their attention to school's pro days. Unfortunately, this year, retesting and checking back in with certain prospects wasn't a viable option. So the Broncos scouting department revisited their initial evaluations. They organized their draft boards, crossed their T's and dotted their I's. And at that point,
A's really in the barn. It's just kind of about seeing where the board falls and where your interests lie. So it's definitely an evolutionary process.
Come draft day, all of Chesin's hard work is utilized. Sure, he's not the guy making the call or penciling in the team's final decision, but he is able to witness all of the pieces of the puzzle come together. It's the ultimate team building exercise, both literally and figuratively.
The elation when you get a guy that you really want around the room, everyone's high-fiving, they're fist pumping, like it's cool. You walk around with your chest pumped out because you feel like you improved your team. So it's definitely a great feeling for scouts. Obviously players and coaches. The Super Bowl is the Super Bowl. That's what theirs is. I think for us, you work all season for the draft, especially. So that's kind of like our Super Bowl. So it's really the culmination of a years long, like hard work by both sides, the pro side and the college side, just kind of seeing, how your roster is going to really fill out and look for the next season.
Like most everything else, however, Chesin's draft day experience this year was vastly different than years past. High fives were traded out for congratulatory text messages, and fist pumps were seen exclusively on Zoom with hundreds of miles between each screen.
Girlfriend's parents actually set me up in their front room with like a fake war room where I had 2 screens and I made myself feel real important, but it really wasn't doing anything.
Chesin can certainly relate to the people who have seen their normal routines transform over the last half year. Remember, he'd probably already be making his 3rd or 4th stop on the college scouting trail if COVID-19 hadn't dealt such a big blow to the sports world.
On the road 200 days a year, I think that what we always enjoyed in our neighborhood in Chicago is just walking around and going to a new restaurant or seeing a new store or sitting on a patio and just enjoying the weather or going to a Cubs game or stuff like that. So I think it's just kind of you miss the social aspect of life right now.
But no matter how challenging these times have been, Chesin remains extremely grateful for the road he's traveled and the life he's built.
I get to wake up every day and work in football, and to me that was kind of my goal. If you would have told me when I was 24 that I would get to work every day as an air scout for the Denver Broncos, I would have thought you were crazy. So to be able to do that and to be able to keep the lights on in my house and pay my bills by watching football and doing my job, man, you couldn't ask for anything better.
He says he's controlling the controllable. He's setting and conquering short-term goals. And most of all, he's well aware of the big picture. He gets to wake up every day and do something he loves. He'll never take that reality for granted.
Try to attack every day like I did when I was coaching at Chaparral, or when I was an intern at NFL Films, when I was an intern up in the scouting department. Like, I truly am I'm lucky to be in this position, and I'm lucky to have this job.
And I'm lucky to have met and been mentored by Chesin, even if it were only for several months during my transition from playing safety as a high school freshman to starting at outside linebacker week 1 of my sophomore season on a varsity team fresh off a three-peat stacked with Division I talent. I respected Chesin's grind back then and thought he always did a pretty good job of distinguishing hype from genuine potential. So it doesn't surprise me at all that he's approaching year 7 with the Denver Broncos football club, thriving in a role where he's able to maximize some of his best skills, whether it be building relationships, weeding out the bad seeds, or painting a picture for his bosses in terms of X's and O's and rising football stars. Chesin was made for the game, and he's doing a damn good job of playing his part in the grand scheme of things. Thanks so much to everybody for sticking with me these last 2 months. I'll be featuring one final guest next week to go out with a bang before shutting down my summer video series. But don't worry, because I won't be gone for long. Regardless of what happens with football this fall, I plan on supplementing my semester's coursework with Rob K's Corner to the End Zone 2.0, or something along those lines. But for now, you know what's coming. That's right, subscribe to my channel and let's connect.